have two remaining topics for the afternoon before the excursions, which are both movement-wide and which are both stemming from the statutory meetings in Sydney 2013, some even further back in the past. We agreed that we would first discuss movement coordination, followed by a short discussion on branding. The time is limited, so this is not a fully fledged consultation. For that we will need half a day or a full day for each topic. So bear with us for updating you on some background and where we are, and for opening the floor to hear your views, your concerns, your suggestions, with a fairly limited time nevertheless available for today. But this is not closing any window, it's just closing the agenda for today, and the consultations will continue. So let me just say a few words on the coordination topic before I hand over to Matthias, who will give us some of where we stand today. I will give some background. As you will recall, based on learning and conclusions from recurrent issues that came up in evaluations and reports and assessments on movement operations, there was an agreement which was taken based on a resolution in Sydney in November 2013 to focus on some of those recurrent weaknesses that we found in our evaluations and assessments and reports from movement operations. And we agreed in the resolution, named Resolution 4, that we would really work on operational aspects of trying to improve in those 4 areas which were identified. The whole resolution was framed by a nice vision paper, which tried to capture the vision and the ambitions that we as a movement have for the future and how we wish to work together better and more strongly in the future to meet the needs of those who are in need of our help. So there was a nice vision paper. I hope most of you recall it. If not, I can encourage you to go and do some bedtime reading this evening. It's very nice. And as I said, we agreed that we would take on some work in 4 areas where we have clear room for improvement in how we work together. And those 4 areas were operational leadership, tools and mechanisms for movement operations, communication, and resource mobilization. In Sydney, with the resolution, we set up a process around those 4, what we call work streams. And many of you or your team members are actively engaged in this work. We have 4 work streams on those topics, which are run through consultations on FedNet, and also telephone conferences and regional consultations. We have a reference group of national societies advising the Federation and the RCRC leadership, and some of you are part of that as well. The whole process is being led by a group that was named the Group of 4 initially, which consists of 2 Federation and 2 RCRC senior managers. That continues to be in place. We've had consultations in Europe in late 2014, and for the next 2, 3, 4 months we're going to continue with consultations in the remaining regions. So as I said, today we have a discussion here, but it's not a fully fledged consultation because that would be a whole day at least. So we hope to come back to you later in the year with more opportunity to speak about this. But just to say, the consultations are ongoing. Many of you are part of it actively or indirectly through your teams. The whole focus is on improving how we work together. We are, of course, discussing policy aspects as well, and many of you mentioned that this morning too. But the mandate we were given in Sydney was to focus on action on the ground and trying new things and new mechanisms and ways of working, and bring to the statutory meetings later this year some examples of what we have tried differently, what worked or didn't work, and where we suggest further work. In the process, of course, there are bigger issues that are coming up, and we are not ignoring them. They are just not part of what we can deliver on for December 2015. But there is the process ongoing since just a bit over a year now, and Matthias will say a few words about where it's taken us so far, and then we will open up the floor to hear your views and ideas and concerns.
Thank you, Lotta. I'll try and be as brief myself. Lotta mentioned that we have this reference group, and I know at least Dr. Yassin is on this, and there may be others. This reference group met at the end of October for the first time in Geneva, and we subsequently produced an outcome. Also, the reason I'm looking at my computer is I have that in front of me here. And I want to just highlight a few of the things that have come out of the meeting of this reference group, because I think it summarizes quite well where we stand substance-wise. Lotta has already mentioned that we seem to, in all the consultations and the reference group meeting, be constantly moving between those who say this is all about incremental, practical change as per the resolution. Let's just get on with it and get better at what we're doing. And those who think that we really need transformational change. We cannot just fiddle while Rome is burning, as some people would say. So that tension, I think, is constantly there. On behalf of the two Geneva institutions, we are determined to try and take something practical to the Council this year, but we recognize, I think, the need to find a good way of addressing the larger transformational issues. The reference group also basically supported us in the idea of, on the one hand, of course, having quite generalized discussions, but on the other hand, looking at specific contexts and seeing what practically can be done to improve cooperation in those contexts among all concerned. And the three that are mentioned in the note and that we're very much looking at are South Sudan, the Ebola crisis, and Syria as examples of where we think there's potential to further improve, as I said. Then, as Lotta has mentioned, there are 4 so-called thematic work streams. On the first one, leadership and coordination, maybe 2 or 3 things that keep coming, shining through all of the discussions, including the reference group discussion. One is that we should see diversity as a strength. This is not about getting everyone to do exactly the same and to look the same and to behave the same. In fact, what makes us strong is that we are different, have different capacities and expertise, and the diversity that will be the strength is in a complementary fashion. A lot of the discussion, secondly, around what some people call shared leadership responsibilities. I think this is a bit more controversial, because some people will argue, as the Americans say, the buck has to stop somewhere. You can really only have one leader with overall responsibilities. Nevertheless, there's a feeling that in very complex situations, maybe that's too naive. Maybe you can have several organizations, not just one leadership responsibility, but of course the responsibilities need to be clearly linked to an agreed role. You can't, functions. So functions need to be shared, but the trick is that leadership is clear in relation to which functions. And then a third thing that is very much a part of the discussions is how to, as a movement, work in such a way that we recognize and work with the increased or strengthened role of host national societies as the primary partner or lead in any operation. That is, again, at times very controversial, although I think there's really a growing consensus that the movement is really about 3, and it starts 3 components, and has to start with the host national society in terms of analysis of what can be done by the host national societies, and the others need to, in the first instance, be supported or complementary. Second theme is on operational tools, mechanisms, and plans. That's, I think, overall a bit more straightforward. A number of concrete recommendations being made, not revolutionary or new. One is to, for example, look at pre-disaster agreements and contingency planning. So to really, as a movement, sit down from time to time and identify what are the 20, 30 most volatile situations. And let's be clear, in advance of a major crisis breaking, who would be doing what. Some discussions around, and this is sort of borders then with the longer term transformational change. We've had some discussions around, should we have a kind of Red Cross OCHA, a coordination body. On behalf of senior management of the 2 Geneva institutions, I have to say we're a bit skeptical about this. Do we really need a separate Red Cross, Red Crescent coordination body? Or is this really, again, about being clear on who does what and who leads what aspects of this? Having said that, I think it's part of the transformational change discussions. What will come back is how we meet this perception on the outside that we are one movement. and that we should be acting as one. You know, I hear a lot, as I'm sure many of you, that outsiders don't understand our complexity. And from an inside perspective, it's just often inefficient. And I'm sure all of us can give examples of that. So again, the point is it really just about working better together, or do we need a more radical solution that is actually about, at least at the international level, joining up some of our capacities? Work stream 3, which is on communication, it very much rhymes with everything else, a number of fairly concrete proposals being made. Overall, basically a call for more fluid, rapid, and relevant information sharing. And let me move straight then to the last and fourth work stream, resource mobilization, linked to communication. My sense is there is really an agreement that we must speak much more with one voice in communication and fundraising terms, especially in the crises that have a lot of international attention. And there is, as the minutes of this reference group meeting say here, there's a call to explore options for joint and or consolidated appeals. In terms of the way forward, lastly, then not much to add to what Lotta has said. We are continuing the consultations. We want to try and flesh out some of these practical measures that I have mentioned. We want to, secondly, make sure that in a number of contexts we demonstrate better practice, and by we I mean all of us together. And then thirdly, we hope that by the time we come to the Council of Delegates this year, we have a clearer sense of what this transformational agenda might look like. It a little bit mirrors what I said earlier about the Federation constitutional process. I think we really have tensions in the Federation and in the movement over what can we do practically on the one hand, but on the other hand, this sort of sense of urgency. Again, are we fiddling while Rome is burning? And are we, because we're taking too much time in agreeing more transformational solutions, actually losing out towards other increasingly strong humanitarian actors? But so again, as part of that, I think the hope is that the Standing Commission is doing some work with ICRC and Federation about a movement vision. I think RC may have made a reference to that earlier this morning. In RC and Yves Dacour will try and put together a first draft of what a vision will look like. So it's again just to reinforce that I think the best picture is we are on two connected tracks here that will hopefully merge at some point in terms of let's do what we can practically, but also keep the bigger picture in mind, and at some point hopefully have the courage to move towards more transformational solutions. Please.
And you mentioned capacities. I actually forgot to mention an important aspect and element of the resolution, and that was also a commitment to, in all operations, for whoever leads on what, to invest as much as possible in the capacity of the host national societies coordination mechanism for the ongoing and future operations. And there we have a whole debate going on about how to build that capacity and who is best placed, because we don't necessarily see today what's coming out from the consultations, that is limited to Federation or ICRC or other national sister or brother national societies, could also be tapped into from other sources. But that's another dimension of the debate. Building capacity for coordination of international operations everywhere.
I don't know, Dr. Yassin, if as a member of the reference group you want to say anything, and we get to that.
يعني احنا لا نتكلم عن موضوع فقط سيكون نقاشا لقضايا تعديل دستوري على الورق، ولكن الآن في خلل في التطبيق على الأرض في الكوردينيشن كوبريشن أو التعاون والتنسيق بين مكونات الحركة. حقيقة هذه تشمل حتى جمعيات وطنية، وهنالك شكاوى إنه جمعيات وطنية لا تنسق مع جمعيات وطنية على أراضي الجمعية المضيفة. وللأسف يعني هذا الترند نخشى أنه راح يؤدي إلى تفتت الحركة، يعني لأنه بدأ يتسع هذا الشيء. لذلك كان هنالك نقاش عميق في الاجتماع، يمكن حضرتك ماتياس كنت موجود، احنا طرحنا وجهة نظر يعني، ونلاحظ انه الاكثر الحاحا على ان يكون هنالك تغيير حقيقي في آلية التنسيق والتعاون ضمن الحركة الدولية هي الجمعيات الوطنية اليوم في منطقة الشرق الأوسط وشمال أفريقيا. يعني يمكن احنا ما أريد أتحدث باسم الآخرين، بس من هم في القاعة ينادون بصوت واحد بالتغيير، وإن كان هنالك عدم اتفاق على الرؤية، لكن الطرح المنطقي يعني هو أنه تكون هنالك قيادة واحدة. هذا شيء متفقين عليه، لا يمكن أن تكون هنالك قيادة مشتركة shared leadership، هذا لا يمكن أن يكون. لكن لمن هذه القيادة الواحدة؟ هي هاي النقطة. يعني أكو اتفاقية إشبيلية وضعت أسس، هاي الاتفاقية عدلت عام 2005 في سيول بالسبلمنتري ميجرز اللي اتخذت، والحقيقة هنالك تفسيرات. يعني البعض يمكن ياخذ موقف منفرد، هو يحدد نفسه بأنه هو the leading agent بدون ما يستشير الآخرين، وهذا هو بأساسه خرق للاتفاقيات. يعني احنا نشوف لذلك برزت الحاجة إلى أنه تكون لدينا شيء عملي. يعني هذا الخرق للاتفاقية أبرز عدم عملية الاتفاقية. This agreement is impractical actually. That's one of the points. لذلك يمكن اكو موضوع انطرح انه فريق العمل ينطرح team work led by the national society وتقود الجمعية الوطنية، وهذا شيء طبيعي. يعني لا يمكن ان يقاد احد على ارضه من قبل الاخرين. يعني احنا لانه نرجع، ويمكن احنا قلناها، للاسلوب القديم الاستعماري. اكو دول كانت مع نهاية الحرب العالمية الثانية اعتبروها دول بريماتشور أو غير ناضجة تماما، فاستحدث أسلوب الانتداب فوضعت تحت الانتداب. العراق كان تحت الانتداب البريطاني من دخول البريطانيين عام واستكمال احتلالهم العراق من 18 إلى 32 صارت دولة ناضجة العراق، رفع الانتداب ودخلت عصبة الأمم. الآن يعني جمعية وطنية قائمة، فجأة اتفاقية إشبيلية تضعها غير ناضجة، غير كاملة، غير مقتدرة، بدون أسباب موضوعية. يعني هذه هي المشكلة الرئيسية. فأسلوب إدارة فريق العمل أن يقاد من قبل الجمعية الوطنية، وتسند الجمعية الوطنية من الاتحاد، من اللجنة الدولية في كل الظروف، يعني سواء كانت كارثة طبيعية أو كانت يعني نزاع مسلح أو صراع مسلح أو عنف أو أي شيء من هذا القبيل. هذا الشيء غير مهم. الاتحاد احنا عندنا مبدأ يجب أن يكون متواجدا في كل الحالات مع الجمعية الوطنية، لأن الاتحاد مكون من الجمعيات ويجب أن يكون مع الجمعيات في كل حالة. الاتحاد ليس يعني it's not a specific entity حقيقة، وإن كان في بعض الأحيان يعرف كذلك، بس هو ليس كذلك. هو مكون من الجمعيات ويجب أن يقف مع الجمعيات. هذا هو أساس تشكيله. يعني أمبريلا تجمع الجمعيات وأداة تنسيق بيناتها. بالنسبة للجنة الدولية عندها مهمات مع الحكومة في حالات النزاعات، لكن هذه مختصة بعلاقتها بالحكومة في مجالات ضيقة جدا ولمدة محددة. نجدها تتجاوز حتى تدخل في العمل الميداني المنفرد وتؤدي إلى مشاكل في الحقيقة، وهي تتعرض لمشاكل. لأن اللجنة الدولية اليوم إذا رحنا وشفنا التطبيق على الأرض في المناطق السورية، في العراق، في مناطق أخرى، ليست لديها القدرة إلى الوصول إلى كل الأماكن. هنالك محدودية، حتى في المقبولية هنالك عندهم مشاكل. هذه حقيقة، والآن يمكن الموجودين بالجلسة يعرفون، لكن هم يقاومون. يعني أنا مندوبة اللجنة الدولية الموجودة أحكي أمامها بصراحة، هم يقاومون التغيير، وهاي المقاومة مو صحيحة. يعني هم يجب أن تكون لديهم المرونة حتى يحافظون على قوتهم، لأن في حالة مقاومة التغيير سيفقدون هاي القوة اللي يكتسبوها. هنا راح يبدون كمؤسسة بعيدة عن الحركة، بعيدة عن مبادئها، بعيدة عن الهدف الأساسي اللي هو الهيومانيتي، راح يبدون كمؤسسة تدافع عن مصالحها فقط. لأن اليوم لو احنا كحركة واحدة كلنا نعمل تحت شعار واحد ومبادئ واحدة، أو احنا فئات متصارعة متنازعة ما يجمعنا شيء ونقعد نقسم الأمور حسب ما تقتضي مصالحنا. لذلك أعتقد أنه الشيء المنطقي والكل يمكن يتفق عليه، كل الجمعيات الوطنية المعنية بأزمات، يعني أنا لا أتكلم مثلا عن دول اسكندنافية مثلا، هم ليس لديهم أزمة وليس لديهم تجربة في هذا المجال، مع احترامنا لهذه الجمعيات يعني ومساهماتها الحقيقة مساهمات كبيرة للاسكندنافيين بشكل عام في دعم الجمعيات الوطنية بالمنطقة ومنها العراق. لكن أتكلم عن تجربة على الأرض واستنتاجات من هذه التجربة يجب أن تتغير آلية التنسيق والتعاون، وإلا فإننا نسير في طريق غير لن ينتهي باتفاق، وبالتالي هذا معناه أنه سننتهي بنزاع أو صراع بيناتنا، سيكون هنالك هذا الصراع مبني على من سيقود ولماذا سيقود وغيره، بينما هي المسألة محلولة. الكل يجب أن يدعم الجمعية الوطنية، لأن إلى أن تصل قوة الاتحاد أو قوة اللجنة الدولية تكون قد مضت على الأقل أسبوع أو 10 أيام على بداية الأزمة مثل ما شفنا. وحتى إذا كانوا متواجدين لاحظناهم بالعراق انسحبوا لأسباب أمنية، وهذه أشياء مسجلة ومعترف بها. فكيف أنت ممكن تقود وأنت غير موجود، أو تأتي لتقود بعد ما تستدب الأمور وتستقر؟ يعني أشياء ضد المنطق هذه، لأنه القائد يجب أن يكون موجود من البداية حتى النهاية، لا أن يختار القيادة في يعني مناطق. مثلا بعض المنظمات الدولية بالعراق انسحبت، اليوم راحت إلى عمان أو راحت إلى ما أعرف وين، يعني أو قللت كوادرها أو نصحت، حتى نصحت بعض الجنسيات اللي عندها من دول اللي تتحالف ضد الإرهاب إنه غادروا. طيب يعني المواطن هذا المتطوع العراقي أو المتطوع السوري أو الليبي أو الفلسطيني لما يجد نفسه وحده، طبعا هذا راح هو ملزم بالتزامه أمام ناسه، ما راح يقدر يقول أني مستهدف أمنيا لازم أطلع. والإكسبات راح يقدر ينجو بنفسه. يعني هذه أعتقد في حد ذاتها تضع أساس هش للحركة كلها وليس لمبدأ التعاون والتنسيق. يعني احنا من نجد دعوة تقول انه 28 جنسية يجب ان تغادر العراق لان هذول دولها دخلت في التحالف ضد الارهاب. طيب العراقي بهالحالة هذا مو انسان؟ لا، يعني ما راح يتعامل كانسان بهالحالة. هنالك تمييز بين البشر في هذه الدعوات، وبالتالي هاي تصنع الألم الحقيقة يعني، وبعدين تزعزع الثقة في كثير من الأمور. لذلك نحن نتكلم عن تجربة على الأرض، هذا هو الفرق ماتياس عمن يتكلم على الورق يعني. لذلك نجد من الغرابة مثلا أنه هاي الملاحظات تقاوم ولا تؤخذ بنظر الاعتبار، وبالتالي سيحصل تمرد بالتأكيد. هذا تمرد سيكون موجود، لأن هنا احنا أساسا نهدر حتى مبدأ العالمية. طيب يعني شنو معنى دعوة أنه 28 جنسية يجب أن تنسحب من العراق؟ أنا أسأل. والعراقيين يجب أن يغادروا العراق كلهم مثلا حتى يتجنبوا الخطر؟ هذا مو كلام يعني. والعراقي حال حال السويدي أو الأمريكي أو البريطاني أو أي دولة أخرى دخلت بالتحالف. العراق دخل بالتحالف أيضا، هو قواته الأرضية موجودة وذلاك مشتركين بالطيران وكلهم قوات تحالف. هل هذه الدعوة ستشمل العراقيين مثلا؟ لذلك الآن حتى نتفادى كل هذه المناقشات والجدل العقيم الحقيقة، المنطق يقول أهل الأرض هم من يقودون، إلا إذا طلبت الجمعية الوطنية عكس ذلك، أو إلا إذا كان هنالك سبب موضوعي، وهذا السبب الموضوعي يجب أن يتفق عليه مع الجمعية الوطنية ويثبت وتقاد الجهود لفترة معينة تحدد بالاتفاقية مكتوبة تكون، حتى خلالها يتم تجاوز العائق. طبعا طرح أيضا موضوع كان أنه قد تقود جمعية وطنية أخرى بطلب الجمعية الوطنية المضيفة. هذه أحد الأمور اللي طرحت أيضا في هذا المجال. فأعتقد يعني دعوة التغيير الحقيقية هي دعوة ملحة الآن حتى نتمكن من تجاوز اتفاقيات غامضة وتطبيقها حقيقة غير موجود. لا يوجد تطبيق لاتفاقية إشبيلية على الأرض، لا يوجد، لأنه اتفاقية غير عملية، اتفاقية لم تراعي أساساً مبدأ الإنسانية. لأنه احنا أصبح في هذه الاتفاقية صار هدفنا مراعاة مصالح المؤسسة وليس الإنسان. الآن الاستجابة في أي مكان من المجتمعات المحلية. المجتمعات المحلية تدعم من الجمعيات الوطنية أو المجتمعات المحلية تدعم الجمعيات الوطنية. هنالك دعم متبادل بين المجتمعات المحلية والجمعيات الوطنية. هذا هو الحقيقة. عندما ينتهي كل شيء وتنسحب القوى الخارجية، من سيقوم بعملية التنمية والإصلاح وإدامة الخدمات بعد ذلك؟ الجمعية الوطنية بالتأكيد. هذه هو النقطة. شكرا جزيلا.
بدي أكد شغلتين أساسيات، لأنه أنا كنت بالاجتماعات الورك ستريمز بالموفمنت ريفرنس جروب. أنا برأيي خاصة وين في نزاعات أو حروب أكيد الجمعية الوطنية هي أساس. ومثل ما حكيت بالاجتماع السابق بجنيف، نحن في الاي سي ار سي والفيدريشن والهوست ناشونال سوسايتي والبارتيسيبنت ناشونال سوسايتي، المشكله الاساسيه موجوده بالكل. نقطه الجمعيه الوطنيه اللي بالبلد هي مشكلتها انه اذا ما قادره، اذا قدراتها ما قادره، ما عندها قدرات تقدر تكون ليدر ببلدها، هون المشكله بدها مساعده مثل ما قال الدكتور ياسين، كان من جمعيه وطنيه ثانيه او من غيرها. بس حكيت لوتا عن البيلدينج كاباسيتي، عن بناء القدرات. هون بناء القدرات للجمعيات الوطنيه نقطه اساسيه. انا التحدي الكبير اللي عندي كجمعيه وطنيه وكجمعيات كلها، كيف قادرين نواجه حاجات المجتمع، وخاصه بالشرق الاوسط 80% نزاعات مسلحه. كيف قادرين نواجه ببناء قدراتنا اذا ما كنا محددين ادوارنا كلنا؟ اذا ما في ترانسبرنسي بعملنا وما في وضوح بشغلنا، بتصور نحن ما قادرين نكفي. لانه في جمعيات اهليه ثانيه، في حكومات، في عندنا التحدي الاكبر بكره بنحكى فيه مع مروان، الورد هيومانيتيريان سامت كمان. اذا نحن مقصرين مش محضرين، هون الخطر الكبير على دورنا كجمعيات وطنيه. اتفاقية إشبيلية بدها مراجعة، أكيد بدها مراجعة. تحديد الأدوار، إذا الجمعية الوطنية أخذت دورها مضبوط أكيد بتعمل ليدرشيب، ونحن عم نعمل هذا الدور، بس نحن بنشارك الليدرشيب. يعني في أمور معينة إذا ما قادر الجمعية الوطنية بتشارك المسؤوليات والليدرشيب مع غيرها تقدر تكمل بعضها. الأهم نقطة أساسية هي مشاركة المعلومات، قبول الآخر، مسألة الثقة والتعاون. إذا ما كانوا موجودين هودي، إذا ما في ثقة ما في قبول لبعضنا. وهون كمان ضلنا نعيد الخبريات، نعيد الأمور. نحن لوين رايحين؟ لازم نقرر نحن لوين رايحين. يا ترى بدنا نعطي دور للجمعيات الوطنية تاخذ دورها مضبوط، بدنا نحدد أدوار اللجنة الدولية والاتحاد والجمعيات الوطنية المساهمة المضيفة والمستضيفة وغيرها. بدنا نعرف حالنا شو قادرين نعمل. إذا قادرين نقوم بهذا الموضوع بتصور بنحقق إنجاز كثير كبير. نتذكر إنه نحن، وأنا قلت لها للوقت قبل، نحن كانت اللجنة الدولية عم تقوم بدور سنة 80 وسنة 90 غير سنة 2015. 2015 الجمعيات الوطنية صار عندها دور، عندها حضور، عندها تواجد، وكمان لازم تتشارك الجمعية الوطنية وتتساعد بالمندات تبعها. إذا بدها تعمل ليدرشيب بدها تتساعد، إذا ما تكون قريبة كثير، مع احترامي للحكومات ونحن تابعون للحكومات، بس في بلدان فيها نزاعات مسلحة داخلية، كيف قادر الجمعية الوطنية تحافظ على مصداقيتها وعلى حيادها وعلى استقلاليتها، وهون ببناء القدرات كيف قادرين نقوي الجمعية تقدر تتدخل على كل الأراضي اللبنانية أو الأراضي العراقية أو أي أراضي بلد بحاجة تيتلبى هذا الموضوع.
As united, looking as a complementary kind of work, rather than come with the mindset of we are divided, we have specific roles and responsibilities and want to pursue that. The other mindset is that we are united, but we have complementary work. We can start like this and divide between us with that spirit of being united. That's the first. The second point is that our definition of coordination is quite weak. We do not define what coordination means. We provided a word and made it a straight jacket to be put on everybody in each situation in all kind of times, which is coordination can start with just information sharing and end up with management coordination. So there is a range of what do we mean coordination. Do we mean information knowledge sharing? Do we mean program design cooperation at that time? Do we come up to the question of management? Are we coordinating our management? So we need to define clearly what do we mean by coordination in different ways. One of the weaknesses of civil agreement is that lack of definitions. The second part is using leading and leader role and whatever. That's serious work. It divides from the beginning. There's somebody leads and the other is a follower. And I think we need to go out from that language. Unfortunately, I was part of this civil design group. But now I realize, but sincerely, we used wrong words. And I think we need to redefine, use the new civil, whatever, to clearly define coordination. Secondly, to provide a flexible framework. Because the situation in Iraq is different from Lebanon, is different from the United States, is different from Sudan. You need to look at a number of elements. The society capacity, the nature of the conflict or the disaster in the country, how the society strengths and connections. All this has to be put together before you come with a framework which will say this is going to govern Iraq or Syria or whatever. And I think with those elements of coming and redefining and looking at the question of lead agency or who leads or whatever, I think we can come with a better solution, flexible framework. And that's what we are trying to do in the Middle East strategy, is to come with a flexible framework of cooperation coordination. It defines those, but at the same time make it flexible enough to accommodate the different situation in each of the countries. Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to maybe reinforce what Brian has just said and offer some, maybe some thoughts, whatever they're worth. Sometimes, they're the spirit of everything, and then there's the letter of it. The letter is the application. Now, if we get lost in the letter, then we better go back to the spirit. That will maybe inspire us and then guidance. And that is the reason why sometimes I refer to many points that may seem to be abstract, but I think they're very relevant on everything that we say. National societies are national in nature. Their members are citizens of the countries where they live and work. So I don't think nobody can take that away from them. And I think every citizen has a right to take responsibility on what is happening in your country, exercise leadership in your own way, challenge your governments or any stakeholders in that, and also move into a direction into responding to the needs. I think that is something which is given, and nobody can take that away from any citizen. And I think that's valid for every single country on the globe and for any single national society. So let's just have an armistice on that point and pose that and say this is something we recognize, we don't challenge it, we accept it, and it is something good. There's absolutely nothing wrong, with that. And whatever we can build on that, in positive response to the humanitarian challenges we face, so be it. However, we can support that to make it happen, so we should do that. We need also to recognize that we are dealing more and more with issues that are way beyond the control of any one single actor. If we talk about the world is becoming global, issues are becoming global, it is not rhetoric, it is just a reality that we have to deal with. And I think we are moving also to another level of global citizenship, that it is also a reality. That is the global citizenship that make that sometimes, in the middle of cold Scandinavia, you find, young people going down to the street and then demonstrating for Darfur. And that is exactly that shared, global citizenship that makes, young Americans, knocking from door to door and collecting money for the situation in South Sudan. And that is also what is, leading, like as I witnessed, just 3 weeks ago, in the Christmas season, in many of the parts of the cold, European countries, small kids, aged between 5 to 15, shouting and standing 12 hours in the cold for Syria, for Iraq, and for many other places, in the world where we face challenges. This is good. This is good because it is we are seeing here a generation and citizens of the world who do care about the situations that are touching our humanity, and then we are using that as an expression also of our common humanity. So again, nobody can take away that commitment of people who care about the issues. Now, if we trickle down that a little bit to the issues at stake that we are talking about here, that is really the same spirit which then many years ago led one person to come up with an idea of Red Cross, and then on a voluntary basis many adhere to that. Over time and over the years we got all of that some more institutionalized, we got it more I would say regularized, and then we put it in more conventions, etc. But that is again the letter, and it is not the spirit. The spirit still remains the same. We can always fiddle around the letters and whatever we can do to make it work, but I don't think anything here that is touching, fundamentally, on the spirit. It is that letter. When the same government, that are also an expression of the citizens that I talk about, also signed conventions and then gave rights and then gave responsibilities to a number of organizations, including, some of us. For the International Federation, it is much easier. So I had in this context, I must say, it's very rare, but in this sense, I have a much easier job because, we are a federation, membership in our organization. We are not given any right by any international law which has been, signed and in terms of conventions or human rights, whatever. So that is easier. But in the same way, let's just recognize that there are many other organizations because of also the global community we belong to that have been given also mandates ratified, by laws. And again, that is all about, the letter. Now, if in that context, I think we agree on the principles, that citizens have the right to exercise, their leadership in challenging and addressing the needs. We are living in a global world where the global citizens also give themselves the right to care and then, call to action and put themselves in action, mobilize resources, influence leadership, challenge their own governments to change situations, which is also part of what we would like to see. That we see also organizations that are given some mandate in the pursuit of the same goals. Leaders are here to lead. Leading is not, and I really like what you say, Brian, it is not about leading and other following. Leading means, to be open enough to provide the space so that we can articulate our joint efforts, toward the same goal. That's what we expect from the leaders. It is not going to be a competition of, who's going to be then leading here? It is going to be, the competition that who will be helping, to find the best solutions, that we need, to solve the situations, that we face here. So this room is full of leaders. And I'm going to be appealing to each of them, that we really move into that direction. Let's exercise our leadership towards, finding solutions. And if in that pursuit of looking for solutions, we find obstacles on the way, and God knows that we will find some, and that sometimes we'll find many, it's not going to be the responsibility of anybody else but our own selves to find the solutions to those problems, that we will be facing, on our way, to do that. I think if we start with that, we can engage the leaders outside of this room, to also follow suit in the same path. And I think we can take also that responsibility. If we narrow it down, it is about the IFRC, it is about the ICRC, and it is about us here, national societies. And we must find those solutions. We cannot stand in front of the world and keep on saying, that I'm the one, then here, my mandate, was this, and then I'm the membership organization. All of that, for not finding solutions, that's not going to be simply acceptable. And I think I'm committing your federation to do everything possible in that, regard. I'm asking you to help us in that perspective that we would like, to pursue. And then that is with the same motivation that we will be reaching out to ICRC. And I must say, the echo that I'm getting a very positive one towards finding the solution. Is it easy? Not. Is everybody being aligned on day one, on the first hour to move in that same direction? Probably not. But I think there is an opening, there is a way forward here that we can engage in and then, work towards that. If we give ourselves, the chance, to do that, then that is something which I believe it is possible. Will it be in terms of another, Seville or Malagua, agreement? Maybe not, because if we are seeing that locking ourselves, in the letters are becoming part of the problems, then maybe we should draw a lesson that we should go back to the spirit and to the respect of some of the fundamentals that what is uniting us, to move forward. For whatever it is worth, that's what I'd like to offer. And also, be at your disposal to play any role that you would like us to play in that direction, together with you and our colleagues and friends of ICRC to move in that same direction.
Thank you, Chair. I want to build on what Ibrahim said and also support the spirit that As was talking about. We talk very often about leadership as if there is one that we need to fight for. But there is leadership enough for all of us to be part of. We need to learn from current complexity theory, which shows how we all need to build up the leadership piece by piece to form that collective leadership that can work and intelligently use the different needs for leaders. I think that the complexity of the situations that we are in now show very often that hierarchy in leadership is not a model for today. It was a model, and Seville, when we worked on that, was good enough then. I mean, we thought we had rather good definitions, but already now, less than 20 years later, the world has changed very, very much, and there is now new knowledge around which shows that we need to work much more intelligently in a network society. So I think we need to rethink some of the fundamentals of what we mean by leadership in line with what Ibrahim said, and really see how important it is to sort of chip in with the different parts that we stand for.
Movement cooperation. And that we will never overcome. So it is the spirit, actually, and it's the willingness to strive for better outcome and better cooperation that should lead this process. So I agree 100% with Ibrahim that this is about the spirit, and this is about willingness to have 1 + 1 = 3. And I think we have come a long way in doing so. But of course we are striving all the time to get even better, and we see opportunities that we are missing because we spend more time on arguing how to work together than actually working together. We actually do only have one entity within the Titan National Society which have a legal frame for its activities, and that's the ICRC. And I think as a part of departure, we have to recognize this very specific legal international role of the ICRC. And sometimes I feel that we are questioning that, and I think that's not fair, because that's why ICRC was established, and we have to recognize that as national societies and also respect that, and I think that's a cornerstone of the Red Cross, so to speak. But on the movement cooperation issues, it has to be flexible, and it has to be led via dialogue. And how to create that dialogue that takes into consideration all what has been said in this debate so far, that each situation is different, each situation is evolving over time. To do that, I think we also have to have a serving leader. Matthias was talking about an OCHA. I don't think we should have an OCHA in Red Cross movement, but it would be very nice to have an honest broker who could be the one who will initiate this dialogue, who would be trusted to have as the only role to discuss with the Iraqi Red Crescent, with ICRC, with the Federation. This could be the Federation, but with national societies engaged. How will we, in this specific situation, find modalities for working together which will make 1 + 1 = 3? I think many of your visions about where you want to take the Federation is going in that direction, as far as I hear you, and that would be really something that I see where the Federation could make a huge difference, not by adding a lot of paragraphs on cooperation, but living the idea of us working together based on our competences and of where we add value. And I think there's a lot of space and room for that, and I think that could maybe conclude this process in a way that is flexible but also principled. But it takes leadership, and a system where you're very decentralized actually requires strong leadership. I think we're all looking for that and all want to contribute to that. Thank you.
A couple of points I would like to mention. First one, the latest ICCG meeting in Paris, I believe ICRC were very clear about their new strategy of working with entities outside the movement. And maybe this is reality. Maybe sometimes the national society does not exist on its land in some areas, so maybe they want to work with other entities. Things are really changing, so I'm not really sure how we are going to accept that or not, but I believe this is reality, and let's face it. The second one, I want to build on what our Secretary General has mentioned, and to share with you the latest meeting that I have with OCHA in Jordan. And when I was asking them about the situation both in Iraq and Syria, they said they mentioned to me, nowadays we are looking at the situation as one area, not two areas. Borders does not exist in some areas between Syria and Iraq, between Al-Qa'im, between Bukamal, between Al-Walid, Daesh. They move the borders, and people are moving from one area to another. This is reality, let's face it. How do we want to act upon that? I'm not really sure that we will be able to have a guidelines which is very strict. I totally agree with Ibrahim when he said that we should be flexible about the situation and try to deal with that according to the situation. They said how we can get aid to those people who are in the east part of Syria, west part of Iraq. The only way is through, not through Baghdad nor Damascus, is gonna through Jordan. Okay, and then you go through Iraq, and then Iraq goes through Syria. So the situation is really blurred nowadays. The same thing applies to even northern part of Syria. So this is the situation that we are in right now, and I believe we have to think a little bit outside the box. And also what I would like really more to see is let's think out of the Red Cross, Red Crescent movement. As Ilyas mentioned yesterday, 80% of aid is delivered in Syria through SARC, and this is reality. But how can we maintain the fundamental principles of the movement with the national society, working with external actors, and also getting the support from us, the Red Cross movement, to the national society? I believe this is the most important issue.
As I mentioned before, we have had consultations in Europe. We actually had 3 separate meetings. It was structured that way. And we have had the first reference group meeting and lots of discussions in between on telephone conferences and such. And I'm very happy to say that most of what comes out here today has come out before, which means that there is a consistency, there's a coherency in messages from different regions, from different parts of the movement, from different levels, from leadership and other levels. And that, I think that's very encouraging. It's very encouraging. We hear change, we knew that that was coming, and really the coherency means it gives us a much easier material to work with for those of us who have to take what comes out of the consultations and try to make sense of it and put it back to you again with some conclusions and recommendations. So in a sense, I would say it seems like you're making our lives easier and easier as we go along. And that's very encouraging. And we certainly hear all of you. We cannot comment on each and every individual comment here, but I would like to make a quick comment on what Ibrahim said about the lack of definition of coordination and leadership. That's coming out extremely strongly in all discussions. That's one of the problems we have with the letter, as Asi just said. The Seville Agreement defines lead agency, this and that, but actually it's a long list of things which are ill-defined. And what the recommendations coming out so far in the consultation is, let's take leadership functions and actually discuss what they need to be in different contexts, maybe using a matrix, maybe using something else, and see in different contexts, in different situations, what do we need leadership for, what do we need coordination for, where do we need coordination, where do we not, and take it from there. So a much more pragmatic, applied approach than the letter itself, and much more back to the spirit, who can do what best. So that's very interesting, and we're going to work on some kind of a recommendation for tools, how to make that analysis in a contextual way, as soon as there's a crisis coming or that has arrived, that those on the ground or otherwise interested can be part of that analysis to break things down and define them much better in a practical way.
Just 3-4 quick reflections, and then we finish this part. From my side, like Lotta, nothing is new under the sun. A couple of things have been reinforced. I think the first one is, as several of you have said, strength comes from our local presence, and that's not just the structure of national societies, but our volunteer networks, as I spoke about this morning. And I think there's really huge recognition and respect from that strength being local. And that implies national societies and volunteer networks. I think secondly, there is a lot of how can we work complementary. We have capacities that may be useful in certain situations, and I think we're moving away from straitjackets where we're saying it's always like that, meaning if it's a situation of conflict, it's always the ICRC, or if it's another situation, it's always the national society. I think we're, in respect of the local presence, we're saying, are there capacities that we can use in a complementary way? And an example that's always stuck in my mind is not from this region, but from the US. I remember distinctly the leadership of the American Red Cross saying, we want to have nothing to do with Guantanamo. We want the ICRC to do that in terms of the visits with detainees, etc. Maybe it's a bad example. Another one is Northern Ireland. where it was very clear that for people living in Northern Ireland, the British Red Cross, that was the national society in that territory, was not accepted. And the British Red Cross had to accept at some point that the ICRC was better placed in those circumstances to access vulnerable communities in Northern Ireland. It's just food for thought. Again, the issue is not to say that always has to be like that. It's purely to illustrate that there may be situations where all of us can play a complementary role to what the national society can do. A third thing is clearly lots of thoughts around leadership, and I think, Ibrahim, you started that and several of you commented about that. We need to see what does leadership mean today, and interesting definitions and aspects to this. I like very much what Az said, that leadership is about finding solutions at the end of the day. It's not about hierarchy. As someone else said, Eva, you said there's enough space for leadership by everyone. A part of leadership being the honest broker role that Anders talked about. So that's a third conclusion for me. Let's rethink, and that's continuity of other discussions, what leadership means. And then maybe two more quick ones. One is Khalid's point about other actors. We're not functioning in a vacuum. And maybe that's a change already from Seville, where we were very much looking internally and maybe had more of a monopoly function still or status. Those days are gone. And final point is the whole stuff about spirit and letter. And Ibrahim, I remember you and Steve Davey and others at the time saying the most important part about Seville was the spirit in the preamble. And it's interesting that we're moving back to that, it seems. And I've heard through many discussions, there are very strong voices to say we need a new form of Seville, but there are also many, and that was reflected in this discussion, who are saying if we just focus on a new letter or sets of letters, we will get this wrong. There is a lot around the spirit, and Dr. Yassin, you spoke very strongly in the reference group about trust issues. That maybe is part of the spirit. We won't get this right if we just have the letter. That's the clear message you're giving.